been open almost about 3 years. We had the normal, little thefts here and there, but in the past 2 years, a lot of theft has grown up, and I'm not going to say it's because of the migrant shelters, but we are surrounded by the migrant shelters over here. We've seen a lot more theft.
So here you have a small business struggling with shoplifting, located within walking distance of 17 shelters for asylum seekers. But although there's no proof that that's where the thieves were living, critics maintain the problems this store is having follow a familiar pattern, which they say the city doesn't seem interested in stopping for some reason.
A community in Brooklyn tonight coming together asking for help. They say migrant shelters in their neighborhood are leading to violence and bringing in dangerous gang members.
For instance, right here, someone has now stolen underwear out of here. They rip it open and they steal it out. I knew something was up as I'm looking out of the corner of my eye right now, and I can see that this gentleman's helping that gentleman steal the case of Snickers.
Migrants from a 4,000-bed shelter nearby fill the sidewalks. They sit on park benches, on stoops and curbs, under the BQE overpass. So many people crowded in here.
We have been witnessing the escalation in violence on the street and in the community for months now.
We've been pleading with the mayor, as we've seen increased violence, that this was going to be inevitable.
Authorities say he allegedly tried to steal with a group of other migrants while he was arrested. The search is on at this hour for 3 others who are a part of that group. Authorities say the group removed some of the store merchandise and tried to hide it in a bag. When they were confronted by a loss prevention officer, they started to fight.
So store owners fear their businesses will not survive because of rising shoplifting. But what nobody's talking about is that shoplifting in New York has already been a problem for a very long time, much longer than the asylum crisis, and that's because here nobody goes to jail for stealing. Sure, law enforcement has the power to arrest thieves, but that's just a minor inconvenience to them because shoplifting under $1,000 is not a jailable or bailable offense, even if it's not their first offense, proving that a city which doesn't punish crime will only experience more crime, irrespective of who the criminals are or where they're from. Which explains why retail theft here now contributes $4.4 billion to the state's economy, and why it's so out of control that criminals are now opening their own storefronts to sell stolen items. But it's not just shoplifting from stores that goes unpunished. Recently, we've had a surge in robberies at laundromats. We've had patrons getting robbed while they're eating dinner at a sidewalk cafe. And gas station convenience stores have recently been targeted for robbery. And that brings us to the real reason why many of our small businesses may have to shut down. They cannot survive in an environment that allows unlimited crime. But critics say it's more than just our laws that embolden criminals, pointing their fingers squarely at the influx of asylum seekers in this city as being part of the problem. However, city officials have pushed back, saying the majority of the 200,000 asylum seekers who've traveled through New York are well-intentioned and law-abiding. Which is true, but as you're about to see, observers say these businesses are experiencing real levels of increased crime, which continues to rise as the asylum crisis continues. So now the question is there a connection between these two events? Are they loosely related, unrelated? What is really going on here? So here we have a bunch of small, independent businesses just like the one in our story today that is being looted repeatedly by shoplifters. And once you see what's going on inside places like this and what they have to deal with, you'll realize that some of them won't be around forever.
So we had to start putting the underwear loose over here because they would take the packs over here. Like, for instance, right here, someone has now stolen underwear out of here. They rip it open and they steal it out. So the only way to combat not having the loss of the theft of the whole thing is by putting it loose and keeping it with an eye shot, hoping that they don't steal.
So this particular business, I went there, and it's run by some of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and they've got some of the lowest prices anywhere in New York on stuff like clothing and groceries, and it's a shame that they've got a problem with thieves. Because when a store like this shuts down, the people that were shopping here now have to pay more for everything they were buying. But that's part of the problem in a crime-ridden city like New York, because right away you're gonna notice that the inside of this place looks a lot different than what you'd see at a Walgreens or a Macy's. Inside stores like that, everything is locked up behind expensive, progressive plexiglass barriers that are supposed to deter thieves. And in Macy's, everything has a bike cable with an alarm attached to it, holding it to the store itself. And many chain stores, they're gonna have loss prevention officers that are gonna roam the store, confronting thieves to dissuade them from trying to steal things. Some of them even have law enforcement on site, but little businesses like this, they don't have a security apparatus. It's usually the owner and some other people that run the store, and that's it. Less staff and less overhead is how they keep their profit. prices down. But it also makes them a target for criminals, unfortunately. Because the only way a little business like this can have rock bottom prices is if they don't have to pay someone to unlock the underwear for you like they do at Target, so you can bring it to the register and then pay for it. And the sad thing is, by trying to keep their costs low and save their customers money, these stores put themselves at added risk from criminals who don't care about the plight of the law-abiding.
This gentleman's helping that gentleman steal the case of Snickers. And I'm watching them, helping him tuck it in. See, I'm sitting there just watching him tuck it in, but I make sure I let them go to the front door because that's what the NYPD says, that you have to let them go to the front door or this is not technically stealing.
So this case of candy bars, what is a thief gonna do with 30 Snicker bars? Is he really stealing them to feed himself and his starving children? Or is he stealing them to resell them somewhere else for money? That's probably what's happening, and shoplifting in this city is so bad. You'll now see candy and ice cream locked up in many of your chain stores. But here you have a small business with a single owner who's trying to run the store pretty much by himself, and he's stuck at the register trying to conduct business and earn a living, and the crooks notice that he's the only one in there. It's relatively unguarded, so they make their move. Now in the next clip, we're gonna see the owner confronts these criminals at the front door and stops them from leaving in a heated confrontation. But on their wall, they've got pictures of other people that have stolen from the store. Let's call it their wall of shame. You can see that it's people from all walks of life that are doing the stealing in this city because nobody gets punished for it, revealing that it might not be something that is 100% related to the asylum crisis. Also, the city's failure to crack down on another type of crime related to stealing is actually making the whole stealing problem worse. Because in addition to a massive surge in shoplifting, we've also got a massive surge in unlicensed street vending. And these two unpunished types of crime are related because everything getting stolen has to be resold somewhere, and the easiest place to do that is out on the street. In Queens, you can see open-air markets selling clothes and cleaning supplies right in front of lotless where they were stolen from. And at construction sites, you can see people trading cash for whatever's in those coolers. And during the wintertime, you've got the same people selling hats, gloves, socks, pretty much everything. You're not technically supposed to do that, and by the city allowing it to happen, it gives people an incentive to steal because they can just resell it right over here if they want to, and nothing's gonna happen to them. If you couldn't easily resell stolen merchandise, maybe less of it would get stolen. But if that sounds like a ridiculous, easily solvable problem to you, look at what happens when the owner confronts these criminals.
And I'm like, what do you have on your back? Get that out of there. And I take the box away from him.
No, you just stole.
In the past 2 years, a lot of theft is growing up, and I'm not going to say it's because of the migrant shelters, but we are surrounded by the migrant shelters over here, and since they've been popping up more and more.
So the crazy thing about this is it's not that a grown adult has candy stuffed under his jacket. That's bad enough, but the owner has to take time away from the register where he's making a living to go and protect his living at the front door of the store. And if you have to step away from trying to run your business to try and save your business, that's definitely going to mess things up. And it's happening in front of other customers in the store who are paying to buy things. That would shut down just about any business and force it to close. That's got to be terrifying. Who wants to go back to a store where stuff like that's happening? Especially when we all know that criminals targeting these independent businesses are typically armed and dangerous. Who wants to put their life on the line to save a few bucks shopping at some place? That is going to cost the company money. Now, the best case scenario is that the cops show up and arrest these guys and the items go back on the shelf. But according to the owner, he's called the police in the past and they haven't shown up quickly. Sometimes they don't show up at all. Yet for some reason, after a big chain gets looted, like a CVS or a Walgreens, the police show up much faster for some reason, proving that the city's laws, they don't just incentivize crime. The city's policies regarding how they respond to crime also encourage it by not sending officers to a place where there's been a robbery after they've been called, leaving businesses wondering how long they're going to be able to survive for. But why is that? Why is there a discrepancy in how businesses that are big and businesses are small are treated, and what connection, if any, is there to the asylum crisis itself? Because this place is located within walking distance of 17 shelters.
believer in just common sense policy. Here, living here in the city, the three big issues for me is housing, the migrants, and crime. It's completely insane that the DA is not arresting crime, but yet it's okay to plug policemen in front of Lululemon to make sure they don't get ransacked. City resources are just being spent.
Okay, so before we get to the bottom of how this could be connected to the asylum crisis, there's an interesting point that's brought up here because big stores seem to be getting treated differently than smaller stores. And to give you an example, a couple of weeks ago, a Lululemon was raided for $12,000 worth of inventory. And you know what? Days after this happened, there were uniformed police stationed in front of several Lululemons in the city guarding them, almost like extra security for those stores. But the small business that we looked at earlier, they're losing $3,000 a month. So after 4 months, they've also lost 12 grand, and the police driving down the street won't even stop for them. But it's not the fault of the police for guarding our precious Lululemons. They don't get to decide where they go. They're told where to go, and the NYPD has been defunded to such a level that it's impossible to send them everywhere at once and have them protect everything at once, which essentially means the city has to play favorites with which stores it's willing to let shut down and which ones it wants to stay open. And think of the national embarrassment that's going to come upon the city if another massive retailer like Target shuts down again. At the end of last year, Target's flagship store in East Harlem closed, the chain citing theft as the reason why that particular location was shut. And it was national news, but if a little place like the one behind me shuts down, it's not going to be national news. They're not a big chain. And Lululemon on the Upper East Side, a neighborhood that's full of rich people, which only has one shelter for asylum seekers, by the way, unlike Long Island City that has 17. That's where police are being sent because the city's probably going to be embarrassed if a high-end store in a rich neighborhood closes over crime. Whereas a discount store closing in a working class neighborhood that nobody knows about isn't even going to have a pulse as far as viral news is concerned. On top of that, there are national implications for this kind of crime during an election year as they highlight failed policies which are common in many different states across the country. And if those policies aren't working out here and somebody wants to bring that to their city or their town or possibly the entire country, that could be something that is top of mind for voters, revealing that there could be pressure on a city like New York to reduce incidents like this at businesses that everybody knows about. But now that we have an idea of why the city seems to be playing favorites and why it seems to care way more about its large businesses than its small ones, we can now get to the bottom of how the asylum crisis may be connected to all of this and why critics are saying it's part of the problem.
A community in Brooklyn tonight coming together asking for help. They say migrant shelters in their neighborhood are leading to violence and bringing in dangerous gang members.
We have been witnessing the escalation in violence on the street and in the community for months now.
We've been pleading with the mayor, as we've seen increased violence, that this was going to be inevitable.
So what we have here is the same problem we have with law enforcement and our small businesses. They're just not a priority for a city with limited resources that are stretched super thin. And in a city of limited resources and limited police, only the high-end stores are gonna get the police when they're available. And as it turns out, the city's less affluent neighborhoods are those that are bearing the brunt of the shelter placements because those are the cheapest places for the city to set up a shelter. Which explains why you can always find police walking around here, 34th Street by Macy's, and it explains why there are police guarding the Lululemon in the Upper East Side, which only has one shelter instead of the tons that are in the outer boroughs. And when you look at this shelter that's at Hall Street in Brooklyn, you've got 4,000 people living in a 1-block radius, and the only way that's even possible is to have massive empty buildings that are existing there, sitting there totally unused, that the city could rapidly convert into emergency housing. You just don't have that in some of the city's more affluent neighborhoods. And sadly, most of the residents at that shelter, they can't work. They don't have authorization to go and do that. Their only choice is to stay there all day, and there's a park nearby. Where do you expect them to hang out? And even though most are 100% law-abiding with no intent to come here and steal things, a small number of criminals may have snuck in with them and may be in those very same shelters, which is having a massive impact on the neighborhood and local businesses that surround it. And even though there have been numerous incidents of violent gang members living in the city's shelters who have been caught shoplifting, New York's laws that allow you to steal under $1,000 and get released every single time it happens have been around since 2020. And we don't have a $4.4 billion shoplifting economy here by accident. That didn't get built overnight just because of the asylum crisis. But observers say there are other reasons why this neighborhood is now experiencing an increase in crime. Even without the asylum seekers, if you were to add 4,000 residents to any neighborhood in town, and those 4,000 residents were not able to leave that part of town at all during the day because they couldn't have jobs or work, you'd probably have a massive change in how that neighborhood looked and felt. At the same time, the police precinct that is there is staffed and prepared for the type of neighborhood that's existed there for a long time. They're not prepared for a total change in the behavior of foot traffic, the new areas that residents may or may not be congregating in. The whole place has changed, yet the police resources there to protect it have not changed, which reveals that this small business in Queens and this neighborhood in Brooklyn are both suffering from the exact same problem. The population size of their neighborhoods has drastically increased, yet the police resources have either remained the same or been diverted to places like Lululemon or places like Herald Square because the city has to play favorites with the small amount of police and law enforcement that it has. Now, Long Island City, where that small store is located, has the most shelters of any neighborhood in New York. There are 23 in total, 12% of the 193 that the city operates. Yet the city hasn't gone and built new police stations to maintain the officer-to-resident ratio that was present in Long Island City before its massive population expansion that's occurred over the last year. And observers say that's going to result in higher levels of criminal activity, no matter who the residents of that neighborhood are or where they might be from, as is evidenced by the photos in that little business that's getting looted on their wall of shame, showing that people from all walks of life do not fear punishment for stealing in this city, threatening to close down businesses all over town and transform neighborhoods by shutting down stores faster than any other crisis the city has on its hands. And the last thing the city wants on its hands right now is a national news campaign of videos showing the utter disgust of residents in some of the wealthiest, most historic neighborhoods of New York City, complaining that their neighborhoods are ruined and that our current leadership has destroyed the entire city. That would be the worst thing possible, which is probably why it's not happening in areas like this and is happening in areas like Queens and Brooklyn. And even though some asylum seekers that have been involved in high-profile incidents in New York, like the attack on police at the end of last year, had prior offenses for shoplifting, shoplifting is something that all New Yorkers are doing. And if you increase the amount of people living anywhere in this city and you don't increase the number of police, you're gonna have more crime because we refuse to punish it. What do you think about that? Is that true? Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.